the ECCE Speaking Test. My name is Nick Frangos. I am Academic Coordinator at the Hellenic American Union, and my email address is nfragos@hau.gr. Now, before we start with the specifics of the ECCE Speaking Test, I would like to say a few general things about the Hellenic American Union. The Hellenic American Union has been a leader in designing and providing lifelong learning opportunities for hundreds of thousands of women and men for over 60 years. Its Center for Examinations and Certifications has administered open and fair language examinations since 1957. The administration of language examinations and examinations that lead to professional certifications is an important part of our orientation as a not-for-profit association and reflects our commitment to supporting our stakeholders' prospects for a successful academic and professional career and personal development. More specifically now, Michigan Language Assessment, which is a non-profit collaboration between the University of Michigan and Cambridge Assessment English, and whose mission is to help people achieve their education and career goals, and to provide trusted English language exams that draw on the expertise of two of the world's leading universities, the University of Michigan and Cambridge Assessment English, two institutions with long and distinguished histories in the field of language assessment, teaching, and research. Michigan Language Assessment has provided American English language assessments for more than 65 years. Our rich history began with the establishment of the English Language Institute, ELI, in 1941 as the first university-based intensive English program in the United States and the first language research and teaching program of its kind. The foundation of modern American English language testing began at ELI. Michigan exams tradition continues today with modern English language tests that are recognized by universities, education departments and ministries, businesses, and government agencies around the world. In 2010, the testing division of the University of Michigan English Language Institute joined with Cambridge Assessment English to form CAMLA, a non-profit collaboration for the continued production of high-quality English language tests. Now known as Michigan Language Assessment, we remain committed to delivering outstanding and reliable assessments and helping English language learners prove their skills to the world. Okay, and now let us focus on the ECCE Speaking Test. Before we start with the specifics of the ECCE Speaking Test, let us have a look at some of the criteria pertaining to the B2 level of the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages. So at this B2 level, a student can understand the main ideas of complex text on both concrete and abstract topics, including technical discussions in their field of specialization, can interact with a degree of fluency and spontaneity that makes regular interaction with native speakers quite possible without strain for either party, can produce clear, detailed text on a wide range of subjects and explain a viewpoint on a topical issue, giving the advantages and disadvantages of various options. Now, the ECCE Speaking Test description. This is a structured conversation with a certified speaking examiner, and the conversation is based on a topic presented as a visual prompt. The ECCE Speaking Test has 4 stages. Stage 1 being the introduction, stage 2 being the stage during which information is gathered, stage 3 is the stage during which the test taker presents and defends a choice, and stage 4 is the stage during which the test taker answers questions about the topic. In order to be successful in this speaking test, the test taker needs to be able to ask and answer questions, provide suggestions or recommendations, present a decision, justify a decision, and discuss a topic. Now let us begin with stage 1. And of course, stage 1 is the introduction. And during this stage, the examiner will ask warm-up questions. In other words, questions on topics that are familiar to the test taker. About the test taker's interests, about hobbies, about school, about free time, about future plans, about the place where they live, and so on. Now here it is very important that the test taker speaks naturally. And of course, it is also important that the test taker does not give dry answers. In other words, does not simply answer yes, no, or for example, to the question, where do you live, Athens? The test taker should always try to say a bit more. And also, I would like to say that the test taker should not worry if the examiner interrupts the test taker and asks him or her something else. That means that the examiner was satisfied with the answer and wants to ask something else. So here it is very important that the test taker does not give dry answers, and also it is important, and this applies throughout the test taker should try not to get stuck. If the test taker cannot think of a word, he or she should paraphrase, should explain, but it is important that the test taker does not remain silent. At the end of stage 1, the test taker will be asked a question that has to do with the topic that will follow, is related to the information that will be on the information sheet that will be used for the next part. And this is known as the transition question. So the transition question is the last question in stage 1, and of course gives the test taker an idea as to what will follow. So in the next stage, which is stage 2, the examiner will refer to the information sheet that the test taker will also have in front of him, in front of her. Specifically, the examiner will describe the procedure. The test taker will ask questions that appear on the information sheet. The examiner will answer these questions, and it is very, very important that the test taker listen to the answers of these questions so that the test taker can use this information in stage 3, in the next stage. So here, the focus should be on listening to the information that the examiner will be giving the test taker. Now, some questions that come up in this stage are, is paraphrasing necessary? In other words, does the test taker need to paraphrase the questions? No, this is not necessary. The test taker does not need to paraphrase the questions. However, if the test taker decides to paraphrase, then the test taker should make sure that this is done correctly. Another frequently asked question is, can the test taker ask additional questions? Yes, of course, the test taker can ask additional questions. However, I stress the importance of the test taker listening closely to the information that is given to him or her when asking the questions that appear on the information sheet. So, the test taker does not need to ask additional questions. He or she can if he wants to or she wants to, but this is not necessary. I stress once again that the important thing in this stage is to listen to the information that is given to the test taker by the examiner. So let us have a look at an indicative ECCE speaking prompt. So once the examiner has asked the transition question at the end of stage 1, at the end of the introduction, the examiner will continue by reading the information sheet. I am the mayor of your town and I have a problem. Find out what my problem is and offer me some good advice. First, you should look at the pictures and ask. The examiner will not read the questions, but these are the questions that the test taker needs to ask the examiner in the order that the test taker sees the questions. As I said earlier, the test taker needs to ask at least these questions and does not need to paraphrase. As I said, it is important that the test taker listen carefully and tries to remember as much information as possible that the examiner will give him when answering these questions. The examiner, of course, will read also the rest of the information on the information sheet. Then when you have all the information you need, explain which option you think is best and why. Be ready to explain why you didn't choose the other option. Remember to use information you learn from asking questions to explain your final choice. And finally, after you have shared your decision, you will be asked more questions about the topic. So, the examiner has read the information sheet, has not read the questions, and of course, if the test taker has no questions, then the test taker should begin asking the questions. In the next slide, you will see the information that the examiner has. The test taker does not have this information. However, the examiner will use this information to answer the questions. So, what is the problem? This is asked, of course, by the test taker, and the examiner would answer, our town's 100th anniversary is this year, and we want to do something special to celebrate. We have two possible options and can't decide which to choose. Then the test taker would continue by asking, what are the options? And the examiner would point to the pictures. Well, option 1, which is the fountain. We could build a fountain in the town center to remember the anniversary. And option 2, which are the fireworks. We could plan a weekend festival with music and fireworks to celebrate the event. Then the test taker would continue by asking the next question. What are the disadvantages of each option? Well, for the first option, it will take time to plan and build the fountain, and it will not be finished until next year. And the examiner would also answer the question for the second option. After the festival is over, there will be no permanent reminder of the event. As I have already stressed, it is very important that the test taker listens carefully to the information that is given. And I would like to remind you that it is not necessary for the test taker to ask more questions. So the test taker, having asked the questions and gotten the responses from the examiner, needs to make a choice. And we are now in stage 3. So in this stage, the test taker makes a choice and defends, and this can be done by using the advantages that were mentioned in the previous stage, if advantages were mentioned. Otherwise, the test taker can use his or her own ideas. Needs also to explain why he or she did not select the other option, and this can be done by using the disadvantages mentioned. However, if disadvantages were not mentioned, the test taker can use his or her ideas as well. The test taker, generally speaking, can use his or her ideas throughout this stage. However, it is important that the information given to the test taker in stage 2 is used in this stage. An additional point in this stage is, if appropriate, the test taker can personalize the topic. Oh, for example, I have also experienced something like this. This is something that is positive. Now, some of the frequently asked questions here are, is the test taker allowed to create his or her own option solution? Yes, this is possible. However, the test taker needs to be careful because, as we said, the test taker needs to justify why he or she did not select one of the two options given. And this can be done by using the disadvantages if disadvantages were given in the previous stage. Another frequently asked question is the test taker allowed to combine both option solutions? Yes, this is also possible. However, this may make things a bit more complex for the test taker. So once again, if the test taker decides to do this, the test taker should be careful when doing this. Now, what happens if the test taker does not mention why he or she did not choose the other option solution? This is not a problem. This is a procedural issue, and the examiner will simply remind the test taker to say why he or she did not choose the other option. This is not serious at all. So once the test taker has made a choice, explained why, and explained why he or she did not select the other option, and in all cases using as much of the information that was given to him or her by the examiner, then the examiner will continue with stage 4, during which questions will be asked. And these questions are related to the topic that was discussed in the previous stages. So there are 3 questions that will be asked. They may have smaller questions connected to them. The examiner will ask all questions, will ask the questions without paraphrasing, and if necessary, will simplify the language. So this is very, very important, and this applies throughout the test. The test takers need to know that if they do not understand something, they can ask the examiner to simplify or to repeat. Okay, so this is very, very important. And of course, the test taker needs to respond to the questions, needs to justify and give examples. And these examples can be based on personal experiences. Here it is very important, once again, not to give dry answers. So if a student is asked, do you like music? Not to just say yes. Yes, I enjoy music. And an easy way for students to say more is simply think why. Yes, I enjoy music because it relaxes me. So this is very, very important for students not to give dry answers, and this applies throughout the test. The other thing that I mentioned already is if students have any questions, and this applies throughout the test, the examiner can either repeat or paraphrase. And as I said, the test taker needs to respond, giving full answers, needs to justify, and give examples, and these examples could be based on personal experiences. Now, some frequently asked questions for this stage. Is the third question more challenging than the other 2? Actually, it is. However, as I said, the examiner can repeat. The test taker can ask the examiner to repeat the question and even paraphrase. So if the test taker does not understand, the test taker should not worry, should ask the examiner to paraphrase, to explain. What happens if the test taker cannot elaborate? An easy way, as I said, to elaborate is to think why. However, if the test taker cannot elaborate, the examiner will help him or her elaborate. And what happens if the test taker does not understand the question or the questions? As I said, the test taker can ask the examiner to repeat or paraphrase the question so that the test taker can understand. Here, I would like to stress that the important thing is for the test taker to respond appropriately, to give answers that are correct. So the test taker should not just give any answer. Should make sure that he or she has understood so that his or her response is appropriate. Now, a very common expression that comes up in the third question is, to what extent do you think this is true? Or something like that. To what extent? It is good that your students are familiar with this expression. Now let us have a look at some of the criteria that apply for the ECCE Speaking Test. For students that meet the standard, let's have a look to the left. Conveys information, ideas, and viewpoint comprehensibly, though at times may struggle a bit. Expresses ideas generally, though supporting details may not always be clear. Let's move a little bit to the center, having to do with grammar. So shows functional grammatical control with pauses mainly at phrase clause boundaries. For vocabulary, enough vocabulary to convey generally intended meaning, but occasionally has errors in word choice and morphology. Okay, please have a look at these criteria so that you are familiar with what the requirements are for a test taker to meet the standard. Let us have a look at criteria that apply to test takers who do not meet the standard. Now let's have a look at some grammar and vocabulary criteria. Shows some knowledge of basic grammar and syntax, but frequent attempts at self-correction, pauses, awkward chunking, and/or missing grammatical elements disrupt communication. And for vocabulary, some vocabulary control, but insufficient to express meaning beyond basic idea. So, in order for your students to be successful in the ECCE Speaking Test, they should use as much natural language as possible. They should keep in mind that they can ask for clarification if anything not understood. They should look at the examiner. They should not be shy. We are very encouraging. We really want your students to do well. Your students should participate as actively as possible. As we said, not give dry answers. And an easy way of doing that is by thinking why. Why is what I said true? Should use examiner information, and this applies in stage 3 to justify their choice, and then of course they could also add their own ideas. They should say why they didn't choose the other option, using examiner information to explain why not, and they can also add their own ideas. If they cannot think of a word or phrase, or have difficulty maybe expressing something they want to say, they should not remain silent. They should paraphrase. They should use synonyms. They should explain. They should be maybe analytical, describe, but they should not remain silent. They should always try to sustain talk independently, and this is done by saying more, not just, as I said, giving dry answers. They should also talk about personal experiences, if they have, that are related to questions asked. They should also give examples and speak fluently without hesitations and pauses. Of course, it is normal to hesitate and pause, but the test takers should not give the impression that they are word searching, and this is why they are hesitating. So that brings us to the end of our presentation for the ECCE Speaking Test. I would like to thank you very much. And also, if you need any additional information, please contact us. And you could visit our site as well, www.hau.gr. And additionally, you could check out our Facebook page, and you can like us on Facebook. So once again, thank you very much, and I would like to wish your students good luck.